Hey everybody, thanks for joining this mechanics demo for Nuke It from Orbit, also known as Nifo. If you have no idea what this product is, you should probably check out the lore demo, which is probably listed in the description somewhere. In this demo, we're going to be covering mechanics for both combat and for task roles. Now I like to do things a little bit more cinematically, so we're going to say, for the purposes of this demo, you are a colony manager for the Prettier Corporation. They are a group of mercenaries and military R&D operatives. Things started off going really well. You had your colony being built up, you almost researched your way up to tech level 2 so you can get off those combustion engines and get onto alternative power. Your research facilities were starting to come online, everything was looking great, and then the plague hit. The plague means operations as you know it have to shut down. You gather as many raw resources as you can, supplies, and hold out until your rescue ship shows up, fortunately just in the nick of time. They strip you of all your technology to make sure the plague doesn't spread to them, lift you off of the planet, and head back towards your headquarters, which is on another planet a few months away. You land in a transportation hub just outside the city. You go through another quarantine check to make sure you don't have any foreign technology on you, and then get into a wonderfully high-tech city that you've been missing on your own little colonial planet. You arrive at your headquarters, get into an elevator that rockets you to the top of a skyscraper using magnet technology, get out and are greeted by holograms and a bunch of other technological conveniences, and then have to sit in a boardroom and explain to your superiors why your colony failed. Fortunately, at the end of the conversation, they find that there was no fault on your part. Though all of your efforts are currently being bombed into scrap metal to prevent the plague from spreading any further, they do think that you did everything you could to advance the colony and were not at fault. So, they trust you to go out and try again. Before they do that, though, they're going to put you through some basic training to ensure that you're ready to take care of their assets. You wonder why they say they're starting off with combat training until they tell you they're sending you to Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri has a host problem, and there's no point in building a colony unless you know how to defend it. So they walk you across the hall into this huge warehouse room. It's got empty walls, and it starts pixelating into existence, and you find yourself on a barren site of another moon. While your last world wasn't nearly as technologically advanced, you're no stranger to hologram technology. You know you're in no danger right now, and this is going to be a perfect opportunity to flex your skills. That said, it's still a little unsettling when you hear a large boom off in the distance, and a rumbling set of footsteps comes up to you, and they have that almost Jurassic Park-style pebble moving as this large creature comes over the horizon. Now, you're no expert on the host, so you're not really quite sure what you're looking at here. What you do know is that it's very large, about the size of a dump truck. It's moving quickly, but not agilely. And as the beast is lumbering towards you, you see it has thick, chitinous carapace covering itself. You look behind you to find that not only has the world materialized around you, but also 3 racks of weapons that you can choose from. You have the choice of either picking a light machine gun, which will fire a copious amount of very small caliber bullets downrange. You have the choice of infantry rifles, which have slightly larger caliber bullets, and while it doesn't fire as many bullets downrange as the light machine gun, it can still do short bursts of full auto. And finally, you have your heavy weapons, your big boom weapons, which are the larger caliber bullets, but generally just single shot. To summarize all this down, for those who are not familiar with calibers and weapon terminology, you have the weapon that fires a lot of bullets with a little bit of damage each time. You have the weapon that fires very few bullets with very big damage each time, and then the kind of in-between. If you see this hulking creature coming towards you that's not very dexterous and covered in armor, which one of those 3 would you choose? Alright, we don't have time for Jeopardy music, so we're going to jump in and show you what each one of these weapons would do. Hopefully you pick the right one. For the purposes of this demo, your character has Firearms 3. Now you're going to find consistently across Nifo mechanics that equipment is almost just as important as the skill using it. As a direct example, the heavy weapon is going to roll 1d20 for every single rank of firearms that you have. So let's see what that does. We rolled a 14, a 9, and a 12. Now this creature bearing down on us has armor 3. What that means is that each die has its armor subtracted off of it. So that 14 becomes an 11, that 12 becomes a 9, and that 9 becomes a 6. So in total, you've done 26 damage to this creature as you line up a shot, fire a large shell, and it punches through the armor into the soft fleshy bits inside. But what would have happened had we not chosen that weapon? Let's find out. For this part of the demo, I'm going to play your co-colony manager, who's just as skilled as you are, but you've got some questions about my judgment. As a matter of fact, you're pretty sure that I smuggled in some illegal tech that got the entire colony infected by the plague. Reinforcing that suspicion, I reach over and grab the light machine gun. Now, the light machine gun doesn't pack nearly the punch that the heavy weapon does, but it does fire an incredible amount of bullets. That's represented by firing 3d4 for every rank of firearms that you have. So I'm going to be firing 9d4 in comparison to your 3d20. I can almost hear Vasquez shouting "Let's rock" right now. So with my 3 firearms, I'm firing 9d4. Now as you saw before, this thing has armor 3, and each one of these die are going to have 3 removed from it because of that, which means anything 3 or below is effectively gone. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove those, leaving us with 4 dice at 4, each one of them which have now been converted down to 1. So I've done 4 damage compared to your 26. Now these mechanics are reinforced by the cinematic. As you can imagine, firing small caliber rounds at a big hulking beast with armor, those rounds are just going to plink off of its side, while the big boom weapon is going to puncture through and hit the insides. Hopefully that was intuitive enough where you know by sight which kind of weapon would be better against which type of creature, even without knowing the mechanics themselves. But let's switch it up a little bit. The hulking creature crashes down into the dust in front of us, 300 style, skidding to a stop, and then starts to dissipate into pixels. Off in the distance, we start hearing a bunch of chittering sounds, and a flurry of activity comes over the hillside. In the place of the big creature before is a swarm of these creatures. Now they're about the size of chihuahuas. They don't look like they're armored at all, but they're moving incredibly quickly and lively, jumping over each other in a kind of wild, chaotic pattern as they move towards us in unison. Now you have the same choice of those 3 weapons. Small caliber, lots of bullets, a decent amount of mid-range bullets, or a very small amount of very high caliber bullets. Which one would you choose? For this demo, we're going to choose the opposite that you did last time. We're going to pick up that light machine gun and fire a ton of bullets at these things as they swarm towards us. I, as your less than solid judgment counterpart, am going to pick up the heavy weapon since I saw how well it did for you last time. Second verse, same as the first. You have 3 firearms, and you're firing a weapon that gives you 3d4 per rank of firearms. So you're going to be rolling 9d4 on your attack against this creature. Now, as I mentioned before, these creatures weren't well armored. They are just more lithe and dexterous. So instead of having armor, they have 3 dodge. Dodge allows you to remove 1 die of an attack against you per rank of dodge that you have. So these creatures are going to remove 3 dice and choose the 4, and another 4. You can imagine the disappointment that I, your counterpart, is feeling firing that d20 weapon knowing now that they have 3 dodge. Because they're going to dodge my 16, my 14, and since they're dodging my last die, that 6 becomes a 3. So at the end of the day, you ended up doing 14 damage with your roll, and I ended up doing 3. Now I use these 2 examples to highlight the extremes of where the weapons on each end of the spectrum were good against certain specific types of targets. The infantry rifle fires 2d8 per level of firearms. So in this case, you would have fired 6d8 as opposed to 9d4 or 3d20, which means it's going to be pretty good against things with armor and pretty good against things with dodge, but not the best at either. But it's never going to be worthless. Meanwhile, the big boom weapons are going to be horrible against little live things that are hard to hit, and the light machine guns are going to do nothing but annoy the big creatures with armor. The goal with this system was to mirror reality enough where it's fun and easy to pick the right type of weapon against the right type of target, or just go with the bread and butter of the military and use rifles against everything. But with the different types of weapons that are out there and the customization you can apply to them, there's a lot of strategic options you can apply to combat. Now, let's get into command and tactics. Now, your directors are overall very impressed with your performance. Less so with me, but they're happy with you. They want to make sure that not only can you fire a gun, but can you lead people in the field? Can you take advantage of your environment and use tactics to protect yourselves? Command and tactics are both skills in the exterminate tree, and we're going to pretend that you have 3 ranks in both. At the beginning of a combat, you're going to roll your command to establish what's called a command support pool, and everybody in your squad, including yourself, will benefit from this roll. Without equipment affecting them, all skills default to 1d20 per skill level. So, in this case, if you have command 3, we're going to roll 3d20 to establish your command pool. Your command pool represents how well you're guiding your troops to effectively work against the enemy. Mechanically, it means that if any of your people roll a damage die that equals something in your command pool, they get to roll another one. In this specific example, if you had a squad that rolled a 2, a 5, or a 20, each one that they rolled would produce another die. Do you like how it's getting darker outside? I've been recording this for so long. Now you might be asking yourself, Sean, that's only 3 dice, 3 possible numbers. What if my people don't ever roll those? Good question. If you sacrifice 1 die out of your command pool, you can pick any one of your people's attack die and make that one produce a bonus die. Now you're going to have dwindling effects out of this. As you sacrifice 1 die after another, sooner or later your command pool is going to go away. But if you retreat, regroup, and re-enter the combat at a later time, you can re-establish your command pool, which means there's actually a mechanical advantage to retreating. Tactics operates in much the same way, except it's a defensive skill as opposed to offensive. For every rank in tactics that you have, you roll 1d20. If your enemy rolls an attack die that equals one of those numbers in your tactical support pool, they remove it like it was dodged. Let there be light. But Sean, why would I want to roll d20s if that was the case? Wouldn't I want to roll smaller dice in order to get the numbers that my people are actually rolling? Absolutely. And fortunately, there are ways that you can do that through skills, equipment, and other mechanics, most of which we're going to cover now, in the task section. Task rolls handle everything outside of combat, whether you're flying a ship, waging a political campaign, or picking a lock. But this game is not designed to constantly be making rolls to see whether or not your character should do something. Focus on the story, progress the plot. As the observer, storyteller, you should be looking at what your character can do and narrating out their outcome. If they have 1 dot in a skill and it doesn't really matter whether they succeed or fail, have them succeed and show how clunky they are through the process. If they are an expert at something, of course they're going to succeed. Not to get too preachy, but you only make them roll when it matters. When there's a chance that the outcome of failure could actually affect the story in a positive way. Alright, the preaching's done with. Let's get to the rules. I'm going to take you through the casual rule set first, then we're going to build on the more advanced rule sets for those who like a little bit more crunch in their game. The way task rolls work is through a point and pipe system, which means you are aiming for a point, a specific number, with a pipe, a range of successes around it.
We're in the pipe, 5 by 5.
An average difficulty is 7-2, which is an example you can see up in the corner. That means that 7 is the point you're trying to hit, and the 2 numbers to the right and left of it, 5 through 9, all produce successes. Let's pause for a second for a quick example. For this example, we're going to use an average difficulty of a point of 7 and a pipe of 2. That means we start off with the 7 being the target, and then we add 1 number to the left and right for each pipe. In this example roll, you have a skill of 3, which allows you to roll 3d20. As you can see, you rolled 1 7, which is a success. The 4 and 11 don't produce anything. Now we can get back to the tutorial. Sean, does that mean that if you hit the 7 you get more successes than a 9? Kind of. For the basic rules, no. You just need to hit somewhere within the range. If your table likes a little more crunch though, yes, the point is worth more successes. Specifically, the point is equal to 1 success plus the pipe. For a difficulty of 7-2, 7 would be worth 3 successes, 6 and 8 would be worth 2 successes, 5 and 9 would be worth 1 success, anything outside that range would be worth nothing. Sean, this is new, but it feels familiar. Yeah, probably because you've played darts before. Darts and archery operate off the same principle, where the bullseye is worth more points than the concentric rings around them. This is the same idea. The bullseye is worth the most, and the range outside of it is worth a little bit less the farther you get away from it. Reminder, if you don't want to deal with the extra math, you don't have to. Anything within that range is worth a success, and that's all you need to know. Alright, Sean, different doesn't mean bad just because it's different, but does it actually do something for the game? It does. A lot. And I'm going to go through some examples now. Do you remember how in combat the type of weapon you chose was very important to the type of creature you were taking down? Do you think it would be equally important to pick the right type of craft if you were planning a trip? After all, you're not going to take a deep space cruiser from Earth to its moon, the same way you're not going to take a TIE fighter from Earth all the way to Pluto. After all, they're short-range fighters.
Followed us! No, just a short-range fighter.
Okay, enough of that. But seriously, you could imagine the difficulty of going from the Earth to the Moon might be a difficulty of 4 or 5, while the difficulty from going here to Pluto might be a 7 or an 8. And just like the weapons you were using earlier, the ship you pick determines the type of dice that you roll. A small fighter or personnel craft is going to be a D4 craft, while your larger stellar or interstellar ships are going to be D6, D8, or even D12. You want to do some speculative flying and try to go out into the vast and discover something new? You might need a D20 ship for that. All of these dovetail perfectly into the point and pipe system that we talked about earlier. The higher the number, generally the harder the task is, and you're probably going to need specialized equipment in order to reach it. But Sean, if a task roll defaults at a D20 per skill level, and the lower difficulties are supposed to be easier, how is a 4 any different than a 16 at that point? Excellent question. First and foremost, you have equipment, which might start you off at a lower die, like our ship example earlier giving you D4s instead of D20s. But if you're picking a lock or you're giving a speech, you're not really going to have a spaceship to help you out with that. Various equipment, cybernetics, and abilities give you access to a mechanic called conversion points. Conversion points do what they sound like they do. They convert dice from one type to another. A D20 can be converted down to a D12, D12 to a D8, a D8 to a D6, a D6 to a D4, and also the same in the opposite direction. So just to recap, if you're starting with D20s and you have a difficulty of 4, you probably want to get your dice pool down to D6s, D4s in order to have a better chance of success. Conversion points help you do that. So aside from equipment and specific abilities, what else can give me conversion points? The main option when you don't have anything else giving you them for free is sacrificing your dice. For instance, if you have a skill of 3, you normally roll 3d20. You could sacrifice one of those and instead convert the other d20 down to a d12. Or sacrifice your second d20 and convert that one down to a d8. There's a number of different combinations you can choose, which gives you a strategic choice when making a die roll. Sean, I don't like math, and I don't want to have to do a math problem every time I have to make a roll. I promise you, you don't have to worry about it. Why? Because statistics are stupid. If you use all your free conversion points to make your dice as small as possible and encompass the range of your success, you're just about as likely to succeed as if you were doing sacrificing and a bunch of other strategic dice manipulation. So why would you ever bother? Because there's some cool mathematical things you can do to ensure you succeed while maybe limiting your number of successes, and it makes it kind of a puzzle. But if you're not into that kind of stuff, just roll your dice. You're still likely to have the same result. So now you know how to use conversion points to move your dice around to better hit your difficulty. But can you adjust the difficulty at all? That's an excellent question and leads us to our last mechanic, focus points. Focus points come from a variety of equipment and support skills, which allow you to adjust both the point and the pipe. Now some of these are pretty obvious, like astrogation being able to affect the difficulty of a pilot's flight, or science being able to adjust a researcher's project. But sometimes it also affects something in opposition. For instance, stealth might affect the difficulty of someone trying to perceive them, or willpower might affect the difficulty of somebody trying to convince you. In any of these cases, focus points works the same way. Every one focus point you spend can move the point down or up. Alternatively, you can spend 2 focus points to increase the pipe or decrease it, making the range of successes wider or more narrow. Alright, let's take a look at some practical application of these mechanics. You and a few investors are trying to start up a new corporation, specifically a transportation one. There's a contract out there that wants to get cargo from point A to point B as cheaply as possible. They don't care if it shows up on time, if it shows up to the wrong site, or even if it's on fire, as long as it gets there 100% of the time. To translate this, they want to ensure that there is one success, at least, on every single trip. Now the difficulty of this trip is 4, 2. Point of 4, pipe of 2. Which means you have a range of success between 2 and 6. Now there's 3 very important decisions you have to make. How skilled of a pilot do you want? How skilled of an astrogator do you want? And what size ship do you want? The lower the skill of the pilot and the astrogator, the cheaper they'll be. And the smaller the ship is, the cheaper it'll be to buy. Knowing all that, what decisions can you make on your pilot, astrogator, and ship to make this as cheap as possible? Alright, I'm going to walk you through my logic. Now remember that if this was a normal character and you were just doing a one-time roll, you wouldn't have to go through all of this process. But this is a puzzle we're trying to solve, where we want to get 100% success every single trip unless something fundamentally changes. So let's look at the most important thing first, the difficulty. At a point of 4 and a pipe of 2, we have a range of success between 2 and 6, which means a D4 ship or a D6 ship could both roll this. But in both cases, if they roll a 1, we fail. Now granted, rolling more dice lowers the possibility of that happening, but remember, we're going for 100%, not most of the time. That means we not only have to pick our ship, but we also have to figure out a way to extend the difficulty out to eliminate that chance of failure by rolling a 1. There's 2 different ways we can do this, and both of them involve spending focus points. With 2 focus points, we can extend the pipe out, which means that the range of success would change from 2 to 6 to 1 to 7. That's an acceptable way to do it, but it costs us 2 focus points. With 1 focus point, we can lower the difficulty from 4 to 3. Now our range of success is from 1 to 5. Now granted, if we're rolling d6s, that 6 is now a failure. But if we're rolling d4s, we can't fail. So to recap, if we can get 1 focus point, we can lower the point from 4 down to 3. That'll change our range of success from 2 to 6 to 1 to 5. Then if we're rolling a d4, which is the smallest ship we can manage, we will guarantee 100% of the time to get at least 1 success. At that point, it doesn't matter how many dice we roll as long as we roll 1, which gives us our answer. We need one focus point, which means we need an astrogator with one rank in astrogation. We need a pilot to roll at least one die, so we're going to get a pilot with one skill. And we need the smallest ship we can get, which is going to be a D4 ship. Those together, every single time, 100% success rate, we will get one success at least. Now, to reinforce my earlier point, the advanced mechanics are not integral to the game. You can play more casually without having to break down every single roll into a puzzle, and I strongly encourage for observers to have players automatically succeed or fail based off the skills on their sheet to have a more narrative-driven experience. But for those tables that do enjoy crunch, I hope you see that there's opportunities here to really dive into the math and have some strategic dice manipulation and have some fun with it. Okay, one last thing that I actually found out through a playtesting group I didn't even think of. I mentioned the example that you can't get a D4 ship to get all the way to Pluto with a 9 difficulty, which is one of the inherent limiters, that you have to have the right equipment to do the right things. And one of the playtesters raised his hand and said, yes, you absolutely can. And laid out an example where with Astrogation 5, you could drop the difficulty from a point of 9 all the way down to a point of 4, meaning you had a 25% chance to succeed. I thought about it for a second, and that actually makes sense in world as well. With a Master Astrogator, you could launch off the planet, slingshot around the moon or something to gain gravitational pull and find like a comet that was going a long way and time your journey perfectly to get into its gravity trail and get all the way to a planet that was well far out of the plane's reach, which I thought that was just a really cool, math geekery thing. And yeah, I'm going to shut up now. But anyway, so fun stuff. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at mooneybenentertainment@gmail.com. I'm happy to geek out with you over math or just answer basic questions and make sure that you're having a good time with the system. At the end of the day, rules are supposed to facilitate good story. Don't let them get in the way, make modifications that you need, and ignore the rules you don't like. Hope you have fun with Nifo.